August 20th, 1944. The morning fog lifts slowly over the fields of northern France, revealing a landscape torn by war. American Corporal James Crawford sits in the gunner's seat of his Sherman Firefly tank, one hand resting on the traverse control, the other pressed against the eye patch covering his left eye. The metal is cold beneath his fingers. Beyond the hedgerows, 5 German Tiger tanks advance in column formation, their massive hulls crushing everything in their path. Crawford's throat is dry. His hands should be shaking, but they are not. 7 months of training have burned the movements into muscle memory. Breathe in, breathe out. Center the reticle. Wait for the command. In the loader's position, Corporal Jake Wilson counts ammunition one more time, though he already knows the number by heart. 4 rounds, 4 APDS rounds. The special ammunition. The weird-looking darts that physicists promised would work, but that every combat veteran had laughed at when they first saw them. 4 rounds to kill 5 Tigers. Captain William Henderson, standing in the commander's cupola, watches the approaching column through his binoculars. His voice is steady when he speaks into the intercom, the same steady voice that has kept his crew alive through 6 weeks of hell in Normandy. Range 1400, lead tank. Mike, you see it? Private Michael Sullivan, young enough to be Henderson's son, adjusts his sight picture. His voice does not waver. Identified, sir, waiting on your command. But before Henderson can give the order, Crawford closes his good eye for just a moment. Not from fear, from memory. Because this moment, this convergence of 5 enemy tanks and 4 impossible rounds, began 18 months ago in a different desert under a different sky, with a very different outcome. The memory comes whether he wants it or not. Tunisia, February 17, 1943. The sound arrived before the shell did, a freight train shriek that turned the air solid. Crawford saw the muzzle flash from the Tiger tank's 88mm gun saw, the projectile streaking toward his Sherman, and then the world became white noise and fire. The shell passed 6 inches to the left of his head, 6 inches between life and death, 6 inches between keeping his crew and watching them burn. The concussive wave ruptured his right eardrum instantly. Blood warm and thick ran down his neck. But Crawford's hands stayed on the controls because that was what you did. That was what farm boys from Dayton, Ohio learned early. When the tractor breaks down in the middle of plowing, you do not panic, you fix it. When a Tiger tank is trying to kill you, you return fire. He pressed the trigger. The 75mm gun roared. The recoil slammed his shoulder. He watched the tracer arc across the sand, watched it strike the Tiger's frontal armor dead center, watched it bounce off like a stone, skipping across water. Nothing. No penetration, no damage. Just a dark smudge on steel that might as well have been a mountain. "Load AP," he said into the intercom, though his voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. Danny Martinez, 19 years old, fresh from East Boston, with an accent that made everyone smile, loaded another armor-piercing round with hands that had started to shake. AP up. Crawford fired again. Same result. The round struck. The round bounced. The Tiger did not even bother to move. He fired 17 times that morning. 17 rounds. 17 impacts. 17 failures. And the Tiger just sat there, 800 yards away, turret slowly traversing, taking its time, because the German crew knew something that Crawford was only beginning to understand. The Tiger tank, with its 100mm frontal armor and its 88mm gun, was for all practical purposes invincible from the front. The German commander did not hurry. There was no need. He could afford to be methodical, to choose his moment to demonstrate to these Americans the futility of their resistance. The Tiger's gun barrel moved with the patience of a predator that has already won. When the Tiger finally fired, Crawford saw it coming, but could do nothing. The 88mm shell covered 800 yards in less than 2 seconds. It struck the Sherman's front plate at an angle, penetrated the driver's compartment, and continued through the fighting compartment before detonating against the engine block. The explosion lifted the turret 3 inches off its race. Fire bloomed inside. The ammunition began to cook off. Secondary explosions turned the Sherman into a blast furnace. Danny Martinez died in the first 3 seconds. The rest of the crew had maybe 10 seconds to bail out. Lieutenant Harris, the commander, dropped through his hatch, screaming orders that nobody could hear anymore. Pete Johnson, the driver, kicked out the escape hatch and pulled Crawford with him. They crawled. 200 yards across open sand while machine gun fire from the Tigers stitched patterns in the dirt around them. The German gunner was toying with them now, firing bursts that came close but not quite close enough, letting them run, letting them understand what it meant to be helpless. Behind them, their Sherman burned. Ahead, 10 other Shermans from their platoon were already smoking ruins. 43 men had entered the battle that morning. By the time Crawford reached the cover of a rocky outcrop, only 3 were still alive. He pressed his face against stone that smelled like cordite and sand. His hands were shaking now. His whole body was shaking. Not from fear anymore, from understanding. The Tiger tanks were not just better. They were operating under different physical laws. And Crawford's weapons, his training, his courage, all of it meant nothing against physics. Lieutenant Harris collapsed next to him, blood streaming from a shrapnel wound in his shoulder. His face was gray. 11 tanks, Harris whispered. 44 men. 3 Tigers did this. Jim, how do we fight something we cannot even scratch? Crawford had no answer. He could still see Danny Martinez's face through the flames. Could still hear him laughing yesterday about some girl back in Boston who was waiting for him. Could still remember the kid's smile. "We don't, sir," Crawford finally said. "We can't." But even as he said it, something hardened in his chest. A promise forming. A vow. Someone somewhere was going to figure out how to kill those things, and Crawford was going to help them do it. 2,000 miles away in a small office in Ottawa, Canada, another man was making a different kind of promise. Dr. Robert Mitchell stood at his desk, hands trembling, as he held a telegram. The paper was thin government issue, the kind of telegram that families across America and Canada had learned to dread. The words blurred as he read them for the 3rd time, as if reading them again might change what they said. "Regret to inform you, Lieutenant Peter Mitchell killed in action, Tunisia, February 18, 1943. Sherman tank engagement. Tiger Battalion. Stop remains to be returned when possible. Stop letter to follow. Stop deepest condolences. Stop Peter, his son, his only child, 24 years old, gone." Mitchell sat down slowly in his desk chair, the telegram still in his hands. The office around him was cluttered with blueprints, equations, test results. For 6 months, he had been working on a secret project, a new type of anti-tank ammunition that his team believed could solve the penetration problem. For 6 months, he had been telling Peter in letters that he was making progress, that help was coming, that soon American tank crews would have a weapon equal to the German armor. 6 months, and he had been 4 months too late. The last letter from Peter sat in Mitchell's desk drawer. He opened it now with fingers that felt numb. His son's handwriting, always neat despite the rushed circumstances of writing from a combat zone. "Dad, I know you are working on something. The other officers whisper about new ammunition coming from Canada. I told them my father is the smartest man I know. If anyone can solve this problem, it's you. Our guns cannot hurt the Tigers, Dad. We bounce shots off them like throwing rocks at a brick wall. Please, if there is any way to make the rounds work, hurry. We need them. Love, Peter." The letter was dated February 15th, 3 days before Peter died. Mitchell folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the drawer. Then he stood, walked to the window, and looked out at the Ottawa winter. Snow fell silently on the research facility grounds. Peaceful. Calm. While across the ocean, his son had burned to death in a steel coffin because the weapon Mitchell was supposed to create had not been ready in time. He would not fail another man's son. Mitchell returned to his desk and pulled out the latest test results. The tungsten dart design was sound in theory. The mathematics were perfect. But theory and mathematics did not win wars. Reality won wars. And in reality, when they had test-fired the prototype last week, the dart had tumbled wildly and missed the target by 20 feet. Dr. Sarah Chen, his lead metallurgist, had run the calculations 3 times. The problem was aerodynamic instability during sabot separation. When the outer casing fell away from the tungsten core, it created turbulence that sent the dart spinning. 1 month into their 4-month deadline, and they still could not make the projectile fly straight. Mitchell picked up his pencil and began sketching modifications, not because he thought he would solve it tonight, but because the alternative was sitting still, and sitting still meant thinking about Peter burning. Work was better than grief. Progress was better than despair. He had 4 months to create a weapon that would kill tigers, 4 months to avenge his son, and save everyone else's sons. 4 months to prove that American innovation could defeat German engineering. The pencil moved across paper. Equations formed. The night deepened. And in a hospital bed at Walter Reed Medical Center in Washington, Jim Crawford lay awake staring at the ceiling. The doctor said his injuries were healing well. Ruptured eardrum shrapnel wounds across his back and shoulder, mild concussion. They used words like recovery and lucky and rest. They did not use words like survivor's guilt or trauma or nightmares. But Crawford did not need those words. He knew what he was feeling. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Danny Martinez's face through the flames, heard the kids screaming, watched the turret blow off. Over and over, the same loop playing in his head, the same helpless moment, stretched into eternity. Pete Johnson had visited earlier. Pete was being sent stateside, assigned to training duty, safe, away from tigers and death and the sound of rounds bouncing harmlessly off invincible armor. "You should request stateside too, Jim," Pete had said, sitting in the visitor's chair with his arm in a sling. "You did your part. Nobody would blame you." Crawford had looked at the Purple Heart medals sitting on his nightstand, then at the photograph he kept in his wallet. His entire platoon taken 2 weeks before Tunisia. 43 faces smiling at the camera. Boys who thought they were going to win the war. Only 3 of those faces were still alive. "Can't do that, Pete. Why not? You almost died out there." Crawford had thought about how to explain it. How do you tell someone that staying safe feels like betrayal? That every quiet night in this hospital bed feels like stealing time from the men who did not get quiet nights anymore? "Because someone needs to figure out how to kill those things," Crawford finally said. "And I'm the only one who stared down a tiger's gun barrel and lived to tell about it. I know how they move, how they think. Someone out there is working on a solution. And when they figure it out, they will need a gunner who understands what it feels like to face that machine. That has to be me." Pete had shaken his head. "You can't fight math, Jim." "Maybe not, but I can help whoever is trying to change it." Now alone in the darkness, Crawford pulled out the photograph again. 43 faces. He had memorized every name, every hometown, every story. Danny Martinez, East Boston. Tom Williams, Chicago. Frank Chen, San Francisco. The list went on, a litany of the dead. He had also memorized something else. The markings on the tiger that killed them. A skull painted on the turret. The number 205 stenciled on the hull. And a name he had glimpsed through binoculars: Weber. Colonel Friedrich Weber, the tiger's commander. Crawford did not know if he would ever see that tank again. Did not know if Weber would survive the war. But if they did meet again, Crawford intended to be carrying a weapon that actually worked. He owed Danny that much. 3 weeks after Tunisia, the Pentagon called an emergency meeting. General Marcus Thornton stood at the head of a conference table in a windowless room deep inside the War Department building. 30 senior officers filled the chairs around him. Civilian scientists stood against the walls. The air smelled like coffee and cigarette smoke and desperation. Thornton was 58 years old, a career artillery officer who had fought in the trenches of France during the last war. He did not believe in sugarcoating bad news. His voice was flat and hard when he spoke. "Gentlemen, we are losing the tank war before it starts." He nodded to Admiral Lewis Hart, who stood next to a projection screen. Hart pressed a button and numbers appeared. Kill ratios, loss rates, projections. "Sherman versus Tiger engagement outcomes," Hart said. "Current ratio is 5-1 in Germany's favor. For every Tiger we destroy, we lose 5 Shermans. That is 50 American boys dead to kill 10 Germans." The room erupted, officers shouting over each other, demands for bigger guns, thicker armor, new tank designs. Thornton let them shout for 30 seconds, then rapped his knuckles on the table. "Quiet." They quieted. "Building new tanks takes 2 years minimum. We have 8 months until the cross-channel invasion." Churchill cabled me this morning. I will read his exact words. "Unless you find an answer to the tiger, the invasion is suicide. We will run out of tanks before we reach the beaches." Silence, heavy and complete. "So," Thornton continued, "unless someone in this room has a solution we can implement in the next 4 months, I suggest we start planning for a very long war." A voice from the back of the room spoke up. Quiet, accented, Canadian. "General, if I may." Heads turned. A man in a rumpled suit stood up. Thick glasses, coffee stain on his tie. He looked like someone's absent-minded professor uncle, not like someone who should be in a classified Pentagon meeting. Thornton consulted his roster. Dr. Mitchell, you are the physicist from Ottawa. Yes, sir, and I believe we do not need bigger tanks. We need smarter bullets. A major in the front row actually laughed. Others smirked. Mitchell seemed not to notice. The problem is not your guns, General. It is your projectiles. The Sherman 75-millimeter gun has sufficient propellant force, but your armor-piercing rounds rely on mass and impact. The Tiger's armor has simply exceeded the capability of that approach. No matter how hard your rounds hit, they cannot penetrate. Mass has reached its limit. So you want us to build bigger guns, Thornton said, which takes 2 years. No, sir. I want to make the bullets smaller. The room went silent again, but this time the silence had a different quality: confusion, disbelief. Mitchell walked to the chalkboard at the front of the room. His hands shook slightly as he picked up chalk and began to sketch. A cylinder, then a thin cone inside it, then the cylinder breaking apart, petals falling away, the cone flying forward alone. Armor-piercing, discarding sabot, Mitchell said. The concept is simple. The projectile consists of a small, dense penetrator core, tungsten carbide wrapped in a lightweight casing that matches your gun, bore diameter. When fired, the casing accelerates the core to extremely high velocity. Upon exiting the barrel, the casing falls away. The core continues to target at speeds exceeding 4,000 feet per second. An officer in the second row laughed out loud. You want us to shoot darts at tigers? More laughter. Mitchell's face reddened, but his voice stayed steady. Not darts, Colonel. Kinetic energy penetrators. At 4,000 feet per second, the tungsten core carries more kinetic energy per square inch of impact than any full-bore round. Size becomes irrelevant. Velocity is everything. This is absurd, another officer said. Send this man back to Canada. Thornton was about to dismiss the meeting when Mitchell did something unexpected. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a photograph. He walked to the table and placed it in front of Thornton. A young man in a Sherman crew uniform smiled at the camera. Strong jaw, confident eyes, his whole life ahead of him. This is my son, Mitchell said quietly. Lieutenant Peter Mitchell, 2nd Armored Division, Sherman commander. The laughter died. He was at Tunisia 3 weeks ago. His last letter begged me to find a solution. He wrote that their shell bounced off like throwing rocks. He said, please, Dad, figure something out. Mitchell's voice cracked. He cleared his throat and continued. I received that letter the same day I received the telegram informing me he was killed in action. His Sherman burned. His entire crew died. He was 24 years old. The room was absolutely silent now. So no, General, I am not a crackpot. I am a father who failed his son by being 4 months too late. But I will not fail the next father's son. Give me 4 months, full resources, complete support. If my dart does not work, court-martial me. But give these boys a fighting chance. Give them a weapon that can actually kill a tiger. Because right now we are sending them to in steel coffins, and we all know it. Thornton looked at the photograph, looked at Mitchell, looked at the other officers in the room. Several of them had stopped smirking. 4 months, Dr. Thornton said. You have until June 1st to produce a working prototype and 500 rounds. After that, your dart either saves lives or you are finished. Clear, sir. Then get to work. Mitchell gathered his papers and left the room quickly, as if afraid they might change their minds. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Admiral Hart followed him into the hallway. Robert, Hart said quietly, I am truly sorry about Peter. Mitchell stopped walking. He did not turn around. Do not be sorry, Lewis. Just help me kill every tiger in Europe. Then he walked away down the corridor, his footsteps echoing off marble floors, carrying the weight of his grief like stones. And in Germany, Colonel Friedrich Weber stood in an officers' club accepting congratulations for his performance at Tunisia. Weber was 38 years old, Prussian military aristocracy, a professional soldier who had been commanding armor since Poland. He did not drink to excess like some officers, did not boast about kills. He simply did his duty with cold efficiency and expected his crews to do the same. But tonight, other Tiger commanders wanted to toast his success. 11 Allied tanks destroyed, no German losses. A perfect engagement. Weber raised his glass politely, but did not smile. A younger officer, fresh from the Eastern Front, leaned close. What if the Americans develop better weapons, sir, better ammunition? Weber sipped his wine and considered the question seriously. He did not dismiss concerns the way some officers did. They are already trying, and Weber said. Intelligence reports indicate research into improved anti-tank rounds. But, Lieutenant, you cannot overcome fundamental engineering in a matter of months. It takes years to develop, test, and produce new weapons. By the time they have something viable, this war will be decided. But what if they succeed? Weber smiled then just slightly. They will not. The Tiger's armor is the thickest ever mounted on a production tank. 100 millimeters of hardened steel. There is no projectile in existence that can reliably penetrate it from the front. Physics is on our side, Lieutenant. Mass defeats velocity. Always has. Always will. The other officers nodded. The toast continued. The night wore on, and Weber believed every word he had said. Why would he not? The Tiger was designed by the best engineers in Germany. It incorporated every lesson learned from the Eastern Front. It was by every measure invincible. What Weber did not know, could not know, was that 2,000 miles away, a grieving Canadian physicist was about to prove him catastrophically wrong. The pieces were moving into position. The farm boy survivor, the immigrant scientist, the confident enemy commander. Each carrying their own grief, their own determination, their own certainty about what was possible. And at the center of it all, a tiny tungsten dart that looked like a joke but would change the course of the war. The stage was set, the players were ready, the physics was waiting to be proven. And somewhere in between grief and rage and desperate hope, the weapon that would kill the invincible Tiger was about to be born. April 1943. Mitchell's laboratory in Ottawa looked less like a scientific facility and more like the aftermath of a tornado. Blueprints covered every available surface. Coffee cups in various stages of emptiness lined the windowsills. Chalkboards displayed equations that had been erased and rewritten so many times the slate itself seemed permanently stained with the ghosts of failed calculations. Dr. Sarah Chen stood at the test bench, examining fragments of the latest prototype. The tungsten core was perfect. Dense, hardened to exact specifications. But perfection in the laboratory meant nothing if the dart tumbled like a drunken bird the moment it left the gun barrel. She held up a high-speed photograph showing the sabot separation sequence. The outer casing was supposed to fall away cleanly, like petals opening on a flower. Instead, the image showed chaos. The petals broke unevenly. One side separated before the other. The resulting asymmetric drag sent the tungsten core into a spin that made accurate flight impossible. Mitchell entered carrying yet another pot of coffee. He had not gone home in 3 days. His suit looked like he had slept in it, which he had curled up on a cot in the corner office. His eyes were red-rimmed but alert. Any progress? He asked, though he could already read the answer on Chen's face. The math says it should work, Chen replied. The sabot design is geometrically sound, but reality does not care about our math, Robert. When we fire it, the separation is chaotic. The core tumbles. We are lucky if we hit within 20 feet of the aiming point at 500 yards. Lieutenant James Foster, the British Army liaison officer, looked up from where he was reviewing ammunition production schedules. Foster was 29, had fought in North Africa, and carried the practical skepticism of a man who had seen too many brilliant theories fail under fire. Dr. Mitchell, Foster said carefully, I have tremendous respect for what you are attempting, but soldiers will not trust a weapon that behaves unpredictably. If we cannot guarantee that the dart flies straight, we cannot put it in the hands of combat crews. It would be worse than useless. It would be dangerous to our own men. Mitchell set down the coffee pot, walked to the window, stared out at the spring snow still covering the ground. My son believed I could solve this, he said quietly. Peter's last letter, he said if anyone could figure it out, it was his old man. The room went silent. Chen and Foster exchanged glances. They both knew about Peter. The whole team knew. Some problems you could not solve with encouragement or optimism. You could only solve them with physics and time, and they were running out of time. Mitchell turned back from the window. We have 3 months left. 3 months to make this work or admit that I failed my son, and I am about to fail everyone else's son too. So, what are we missing? What variable have we not considered? Chen pulled out her calculations again, spreading them across the test bench. The Sabo design assumes perfect symmetrical separation. Four petals identical mass separating simultaneously at identical velocities. But manufacturing tolerances mean the petals are never exactly identical. Even a difference of a few thousandths of an inch creates asymmetry. Can we tighten manufacturing tolerances? We are already at the limit of what machine shops can produce. We would need precision that does not exist outside of laboratory conditions. Foster leaned forward. What if we approach it differently instead of trying to make the petals identical? What if we design the separation to be inherently stable, even with small variations? How? Mitchell asked. Foster shrugged. I am a soldier, not an engineer, but in artillery we use driving bands that engage rifling. The spin stabilizes the projectile. Could we do something similar? Rifling the tungsten core would strip the barrel rifling, Chen said. Tungsten is too hard. It would destroy the gun after a few shots. They fell silent again. Outside evening was approaching. Somewhere across the ocean, American and British tank crews were climbing into their Shermans knowing their guns could not hurt the tigers they would face. Somewhere fathers were writing letters to sons in combat zones, not knowing if those letters would arrive before the telegrams did. Mitchell poured himself another cup of coffee, picked up a piece of chalk, began sketching on the board again. Not because he had a new idea, just because stopping felt like surrender. The night deepened, the equations multiplied, and the solution remained stubbornly out of reach. 2 weeks later, at 2 in the morning, Sarah Chen was still in the laboratory. She had sent Mitchell and Foster home hours ago, ordering them to sleep in actual beds for once. But she could not sleep. The Sabo separation problem haunted her. She kept running simulations in her head, kept seeing that high-speed photograph of the chaotic petal breakup. She was drinking her fifth cup of coffee when her hand slipped. The cup fell, hit the edge of the desk, shattered. Porcelain fragments scattered across the floor in a perfect radial pattern, completely symmetrical, each piece the same distance from the impact point. Chen stared at the broken cup. Then she started laughing. She ran to the chalkboard and began sketching frantically. Not the Sabbat design they had been using, a new design. If the cup shattered symmetrically because the impact force distributed evenly, what if they designed the Sabbat to shatter the same way, not to separate cleanly, but to break? Controlled fracture along predetermined stress lines. If they scored the Sabbat casing with precision grooves like perforations on a postage stamp, the propellant pressure would fracture it along those lines. Perfect symmetry guaranteed by physics rather than manufacturing tolerance. The petals would not separate. They would shatter. And they would shatter identically every time because the stress lines would be identical. She worked through the calculations 3 times, checking and rechecking. The math held. The physics supported it. It could work. At 7 in the morning, Mitchell arrived to find Chen asleep at her desk, surrounded by blueprints and equations, an empty coffee pot beside her, and a shattered cup still scattered on the floor. He read her calculations. Read them again. Then he woke her gently. "Sarah, this is brilliant." She blinked awake, confused for a moment. Then she remembered. The symmetrical fracture pattern. Will it work? The math says yes, but we need to manufacture a prototype to be certain. How long? If I call the British munitions plant now priority rush, we could have test samples in 7 days. Make it 5. We have lost too much time already. Chen reached for the telephone. Mitchell watched her dial, watched her explain the modifications to the chief machinist, watched hope kindle in her eyes. Maybe they had not failed yet. 5 days later, they stood at the firing range with a new prototype. General Thornton had flown up from Washington to observe. Other officers stood behind blast shields, skeptical expressions on their faces. The target was a captured German armor plate, 80 millimeters thick, mounted on a test stand at 800 yards. Mitchell loaded the modified APDS round himself. His hands shook slightly as he chambered it into the 17-pounder gun they were using for tests. This was it. This was the moment that would determine whether his son's death meant something or whether Mitchell had wasted 4 months chasing an impossible dream. Foster stood beside him. "Ready when you are, Doctor." Mitchell stepped back from the gun, nodded to the firing crew. Fire! The 17-pounder roared. The sound was different from a standard round. Sharper, higher pitched. The recoil seemed less violent. Through binoculars, they watched the sabot separate. This time the petals did not break unevenly. They shattered, perfectly symmetrical. 4 identical fragments spinning away from the tungsten core like a flower exploding into bloom. The dart flew straight, arrow straight, no tumble, no deviation. It struck the armor plate with a sound like a hammer hitting an anvil. Clean hole, completely through. The dart continued through the armor, through the mounting frame, and buried itself in the dirt backstop 50 yards beyond the target. Silence, then cheering. The test crew erupted. Chen grabbed Mitchell in a hug. Foster was grinning ear to ear. General Thornton walked to the target, examined the hole, ran his finger around the edge. The steel had not just been penetrated, it had been punched through so cleanly that the edges were smooth. He turned back to Mitchell. Doctor, you actually did it. Mitchell collapsed into a folding chair. 2 months of failure, 2 months of doubt, and now in one-shot vindication. But the celebration lasted exactly 30 seconds before Foster spoke the words that turned triumph into crisis. Sirs, we have a problem. Tungsten. Thornton looked up. What about it? Global supply is extremely limited. China and Sweden are the primary sources. Supply chains are disrupted by the war. Our current stockpile combined with projected imports allows us to produce approximately 500 rounds. Perhaps 800 if we push every source to maximum. The cheering stopped. 500 rounds. Thornton's voice was flat. We need 50,000. Yes, sir. But tungsten carbide of the required density and purity is one of the rarest materials on Earth. We are using what we have. That is all we have. Thornton looked at the hole in the armor plate, looked at Mitchell. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of terrible decisions. Then these rounds will be reserved for elite units only. Sherman Firefly tanks exclusively, and every gunner will be trained to make every single shot count. Dr. Mitchell, you have until September to refine the design and produce 500 rounds. After that, it is out of our hands and in God's. Mitchell nodded slowly. They had solved the technical problem. Now they faced a logistics nightmare. 500 rounds to fight an entire war. But 500 rounds were 500 more than they had yesterday. And somewhere Jim Crawford was about to learn that the weapon he had been waiting for actually existed. Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland, June 1943. Crawford stood in the receiving area of the Ordnance Testing Division, confused about why he had been reassigned here. He was a tank gunner, a combat veteran. What did they need him for at a test facility? A sergeant directed him to Building 7, Mitchell's temporary laboratory. Crawford knocked. A voice from inside called for him to enter. The office looked like a hurricane had torn through a library. Papers everywhere, chalkboards covered in equations, coffee cups breeding in corners. And in the center of it all, a rumpled man in a stained suit who looked like he had not slept in a week. Corporal Crawford, Mitchell asked, looking up from a blueprint. Yes, sir, reporting as ordered. Mitchell studied him for a long moment, took in the Purple Heart ribbon, the slight tilt of Crawford's head that suggested hearing damage, the way his eyes did not quite focus the same way most people's did. You were at Tunisia. You faced the Tigers. It was not a question. Crawford answered anyway. Yes, sir. Tell me about it. Not the official after-action report. Tell me what it felt like, what you saw, what you heard, every inning. So Crawford told him about firing 17 rounds that did nothing. Told him about the metallic clang of shells bouncing off armor. Told him about the slow, deliberate turret traverse. Told him about Danny Martinez burning. Told him about crawling 200 yards while machine gun fire stitched patterns in the sand around him. Mitchell listened without interrupting, took notes occasionally, sometimes closed his eyes, and Crawford realized he was visualizing the scene, putting himself there. When Crawford finished, Mitchell was quiet for a moment. Then he stood and walked to a locked cabinet, opened it, pulled out a metal cylinder about the size of a coffee can. He placed it on the desk between them and unscrewed the top. Inside was what looked like a thin metal dart, no thicker than a pencil, wrapped in a lightweight casing that looked too fragile to survive being fired from a gun. Crawford stared at it. Then he started laughing. He could not help it. The laugh was not mocking. It was the laughter of absurdity, of disbelief, of a mind trying to reconcile what his eyes were seeing with what his experience told him about tank warfare. "Sir," Crawford managed between laughs, "that is a dart. You want us to shoot darts at tigers." Mitchell did not get offended. His expression suggested he had heard this reaction before. "I know how it looks, Corporal, but the physics are sound. This tungsten core, when fired from a 17-pounder gun, will travel at 4,000 feet per second. At that velocity, it will penetrate tiger armor like a hot knife through butter." Crawford's laughter died. He picked up the dart, felt its weight, examined the tungsten core. His farm boy hands, calloused from working machinery, could tell the material was different, dense in a way that normal steel was not. "Will it work, sir, honestly?" Mitchell met his eyes. "The mathematics say yes. The test firings say yes. But mathematics and tests are not combat. That is why I need you. I need someone who understands what it feels like to face a tiger. Someone who can tell me if this is practical or just laboratory fantasy." Crawford thought about Danny Martinez, about 43 names on his list, about the promise he had made to himself in the Tunisian sand. "I will help you, sir, but I need you to be honest with me. If this will not work in combat, if you are just guessing, tell me now. Do not send more men to die on false hope." "Agreed," Mitchell said. "And if it does work, you will train the gunners who use it. You will make sure they know how to shoot this dart perfectly, because we only have 500 rounds for the entire Allied army. Every shot has to count." They shook hands, the physicist and the gunner, the grieving father and the guilty survivor. Two men from different worlds united by the same desperate need to make sure no more sons burned in tanks. "When do we start?" Crawford asked. "Right now. We have 3 months to turn this dart into a weapon. And then you have 4 months to turn gunners into artists, because shooting this round is not like shooting standard ammunition. It is faster. The trajectory is flatter. The ballistics are completely different. Your gunners will need to forget everything they know and learn a new way to fight." Crawford picked up the dart again, felt its weight, thought about physics and velocity and whether a tiny piece of tungsten could really kill a monster. "Then we better get started, sir. We have a lot of tigers to kill." And in Berlin, German intelligence was beginning to notice something unusual. Colonel Friedrich Weber sat in a briefing room reviewing reports from agents in Allied countries. Most of it was routine: troop movements, supply shipments, the usual intelligence gathering. But one report caught his attention. An agent in Canada reported unusual activity at a National Research Council facility in Ottawa. High security, restricted access, deliveries of tungsten carbide in quantities that suggested weapons development rather than research. Weber's adjutant leaned over his shoulder. "Could be a new anti-tank round, sir. Should we be concerned?" Weber considered. "Possibly, but developing a new projectile takes years. We have already won the armor race. Even if they are working on something, it will not be ready in time to effect the invasion. And if it is ready, then we adapt. But Lieutenant, the Tiger's armor is 100 millimeters of hardened steel. There is no projectile in existence that can reliably defeat it. Whatever they are developing, it will not be enough." The adjutant nodded and filed a report. Weber returned to other matters. He had more pressing concerns than theoretical Allied weapons development. The Eastern Front was consuming Tigers at an alarming rate. The Americans were building Shermans faster than Germany could destroy them. The war was becoming a numbers game, and numbers were not Germany's strength. But as long as each Tiger could kill 5 Shermans, the mathematics favored Germany. As long as Allied tank crews feared the Tiger, psychology worked in Germany's favor. Weber did not know that in a laboratory in Maryland, a farm boy from Ohio was learning to shoot a dart that would shatter both the mathematics and the psychology. The pieces were converging. The weapon existed. The trainer was in place. Soon combat crews would need to learn. And in England, those crews were waiting, skeptical and desperate in equal measure. October 1943, a military depot in southern England. Captain William Henderson stood in a briefing room with 19 other Sherman Firefly commanders. Henderson was 31 years old, West Point graduate, a man who had learned leadership in the lecture halls of the academy and learned war in the burning fields of North Africa. He had lost 11 tanks to Tigers, 43 men under his command, dead because their guns were not good enough. because American armor was designed for infantry support, not for killing other tanks. The scars on Henderson's hands were from the last time his tank had burned. He had pulled 2 crew members out through the escape hatch while ammunition cooked off around them. The burns had healed. The memory had not. A British colonel stood at the front of the room. "Gentlemen, Corporal Crawford will brief you on special ammunition. Pay attention. Your lives may depend on it." Crawford entered, young, enlisted, wearing a Purple Heart ribbon and carrying a metal case. He placed the case on the table and opened it. Inside, nestled in foam, was the dart. The reaction was immediate: laughter. Loud and unrestrained, Henderson heard himself laugh along with the others. Not from mockery, from disbelief. They had been promised a weapon that could kill tigers, and they were being shown what looked like a child's toy. "Begging pardon," Henderson said when the laughter died down, "but that looks like something my 8-year-old daughter would use in a pea shooter." More laughter. Crawford waited for it to subside. His face showed no anger, no offense, just patience. When the room was quiet, Crawford placed a thick steel plate on the table with a heavy thunk. "This is Tiger frontal armor," he said. His voice was flat, factual. 100 millimeters. I have fired standard armor-piercing rounds at plates like this. 17 times in one engagement. All 17 bounced. I know. I was there. I watched my entire platoon burn because we could not penetrate." The laughter stopped. "This dart," Crawford continued, holding up the APDS round, "will go through that armor like it is not there, but only if you shoot it perfectly. You will get 12 rounds per tank. 12 shots to fight the entire campaign. Maybe the entire war. Miss with those 12 shots, and you are back to bouncing rounds off tigers while they kill you from a mile away. That is why I am here, to make sure you do not miss." Henderson studied the young corporal, studied the way he held the dart, the way his eyes did not waver when he talked about his platoon burning. This was not a man guessing. This was a man who had paid in blood for his knowledge. "Corporal," Henderson said carefully, "I have lost 11 tanks to tigers. 43 men, good men who trusted me to bring them home. You are telling me this dart is the answer. I am telling you it is the only answer we have, sir, and it works, but only if you trust the physics instead of what it looks like." "Prove it," Henderson said. "Tomorrow. Live fire demonstration. If that dart does not go through tiger armor, you can go back to America, and we will keep fighting the old way." Crawford nodded. "Fair enough, sir. But when it does work, you will train your crews like their lives depend on it. Because they do." The next morning, the proving ground was crowded. 20 Firefly commanders, British officers, American observers. Even Mitchell had flown in from Canada overnight, though he stood at the back trying to be invisible. The target was a captured Tiger tank. Battle damaged, towed back from Tunisia, set up at 800 yards downrange. Crawford climbed into the gunner's seat of Henderson's Firefly. Henderson took the commander's position, standing in the cupola directly above Crawford. "You really think you can hit that from here?" Henderson asked. "Yes, sir. I have done it 50 times in training." "Training is not combat." "No, sir. Combat is harder. That is why we train harder." Crawford loaded the APDS round. The loading sequence felt strange to Henderson watching from above. The round was so much lighter than standard ammunition. It looked wrong, felt wrong. Mitchell watched from behind sandbags, binoculars pressed to his eyes. His hands were shaking. If this failed in front of 20 skeptical commanders, the program was finished. If it succeeded, they had a chance. He whispered under his breath, "Please work. Please God, let it work." Crawford settled into the sight picture. Breathing steady, hands calm, all the training and all the practice, all the muscle memory activated. He was not thinking anymore, just executing. "Fire when ready," Henderson said. Crawford breathed in, breathed out, centered the reticle, steady pressure on the trigger. The gun roared, but the sound was different, sharper, higher pitched than a standard round, and almost immediately after a strange whistling sound as the sabot pedals separated and fell away. Every eye followed the tracer. 800 yards in less than 2 seconds. The dart struck the tiger's frontal glacis with a sound no one there had ever heard before. Not the dull thud of a bouncing round, not the crunch of a failed penetration attempt. A sharp, clean crack. the sound of physics overcoming steel. Clean hole, straight through 100 millimeters of armor. The dart continued completely through the tank, exited the rear armor, and buried itself in the dirt backstop 50 yards beyond. Complete penetration. Silence. Absolute silence. 20 veteran tank commanders stood speechless. Henderson climbed out of the Firefly and walked to the Tiger. His hands were shaking as he examined the entry hole. Smooth edges, no spalling. The dart had not forced its way through. It had simply punched through as if the armor was not there. He looked back at Crawford. That went completely through. Yes, sir. The British colonel approached the Tiger, disbelief on his face. That is impossible. That armor is 100 millimeters. Mitchell stepped forward from his position at the back. It is not impossible, Colonel. It is velocity, 4,000 feet per second. The kinetic energy density is sufficient to overcome any armor currently in production. Henderson turned to face his fellow commanders, turned to face Mitchell. When he spoke, his voice was different. The skepticism was gone, replaced by something harder. Something like hope. Dr. Mitchell, my boys have been dying because our guns are not good enough. You are telling me this dart can kill tigers? Yes, Captain, if your gunners shoot accurately. Henderson looked at Crawford. Corporal, you said we get 12 rounds per tank. Yes, sir, tungsten is rare. 500 rounds total for all Allied Firefly units. Your tank receives 12. 12 shots for an entire campaign. Yes, sir. Henderson was quiet for a moment. Then he turned to his gunner, a 19-year-old kid from Boston named Mike Sullivan. Mike, you hear that 12 shots? I heard, Captain. Can you make 12 kills? Sullivan looked at the hole in the Tiger, looked at Crawford. If Corporal Crawford teaches me how, yes, sir. Crawford stepped forward. I will teach you more than how, Private. I will teach you to shoot this dart so well you could hit a tiger's vision port at 1,000 yards in the dark, because that is what it takes to survive. Henderson extended his hand to Crawford. When do we start? Right now, sir. We have 7 months until the invasion. That is 7 months to turn your gunners into artists. 7 months to learn to trust a weapon that looks like a toy but kills like a cannon. 7 months to get ready for the Tigers. They shook hands. The partnership sealed. And across the proving ground, 20 commanders who had laughed at the dart an hour ago were now gathering around it, touching it, holding it, beginning to believe. Mitchell watched from the sidelines, watched hope kindle in the eyes of men who had not had hope in months, watched them handle his creation with something approaching reverence. For the first time since Peter died, Mitchell felt something other than grief. He felt purpose. The dart worked. Now they just had to teach warriors to use it and pray that 500 rounds would be enough to kill the Tigers standing between them and Berlin. The laughing had stopped. The learning was about to begin. And somewhere in Germany, Colonel Weber continued planning his defense, unaware that the weapon he could not imagine was about to shatter everything he believed about armor and firepower and invincibility. The war was about to change, one tiny dart at a time, October through May. 7 months of training that would have broken lesser men. Crawford ran the Firefly gunners through a regimen that made boot camp look gentle. Not because he enjoyed pushing them to exhaustion, because he knew what waited for them across the channel. He knew the sound a Tiger's engine made, knew the sight of that massive gun barrel traversing toward you, knew what it felt like to fire 17 times and accomplish nothing. He would not send these boys into that hell unprepared. Every morning at 0500 physical training, running until their legs burned, push-ups until their arms shook, not to build muscle, to build the ability to function when adrenaline flooded the system, to shoot accurately when terrified, to breathe steady when every instinct screamed to panic. Private Mike Sullivan became Crawford's special project. The kid had talent, quick reflexes, good eye, but he rushed his shots, eager to impress, eager to prove himself. And in combat against Tigers, rushing meant dying. One afternoon on the range, Sullivan fired 3 practice APDS rounds. Precious ammunition. He hit 3 targets out of 5, 60%. Crawford walked up to the tank, his voice flat. Not good enough. Sullivan's face flushed. 3 out of 5 is passing, Corporal. In school, in combat, 2 misses means 2 dead crews. Yours and the crew you failed to protect. Again. Sullivan wanted to argue. Crawford could see it in the kid's eyes, but something in Crawford's expression, in the Purple Heart ribbon, in the slight tilt of his head from the ruptured eardrum, made Sullivan swallow his protest. After official training ended at 1700, Crawford stayed. He pulled Sullivan aside for extra work. They sat on the Firefly's hull as the sun set over the English countryside. Crawford handed Sullivan a photograph. Danny Martinez, 19 years old, Boston accent, smile that could light up a room. "This was my loader," Crawford said quietly. "Died at Tunisia, same age as you, same accent, same eagerness to prove himself." Sullivan stared at the photograph. "I think about him every day," Crawford continued. "Think about whether I could have done something different. Fired faster, aimed better, something, anything. But I know the truth. We did not have the right weapon. Danny died because physics was against us." He took the photograph back. "Now we have the right weapon, and I am making damn sure no one else dies because their gunner rushed a shot. You understand?" "Yes, Corporal." "Why do you rush Mike?" Sullivan was quiet for a moment. "Want to make you proud." "Then impress me by staying alive. Speed comes from repetition, not from hurrying. You shoot this dart the same way every time. Breathe in, breathe out. Center the reticle. Smooth trigger press, like a heartbeat. Consistent, reliable, automatic." Over the next months, Sullivan transformed. The rushing stopped. The flowing began. By May 1944, he could hit a moving target at 1,200 yards. In low light, first shot every time. Henderson watched his gunner's final qualification. Perfect score on every metric. "Crawford," Henderson said, "you turned my reckless kid into the best gunner I have ever seen." "He was always the best, sir. Just needed to believe it." But Crawford carried a secret. During a demonstration in May, a manufacturing defect in an APDS round caused it to explode in the breech. Metal fragments peppered his face. His left eye took the worst of it. The doctor's verdict was immediate. Partial vision loss. You cannot remain a combat gunner. Crawford had begged, argued, demanded. But Henderson made the final call. "Jim, you are not a gunner anymore, but you can be my advisor. Come with my crew. Guide us. You will be there, just not behind the gun." So Crawford wore an eye patch now, and Sullivan took the primary gunner position. And Crawford had to learn the hardest lesson of all, trusting someone else with the mission that had consumed him for 18 months. "You ready for this?" Crawford asked Sullivan the day before they shipped to the invasion staging area. "You taught me everything. I will not let you down." "You better not. I only have one eye left to watch you with." June 5, 1944, the night before D-Day. Henderson's crew sat on their Firefly on the deck of a landing ship. The channel waters were rough. The sky was dark. Somewhere ahead, the coast of France waited with all its guns and mines and death. The crew performed final checks with the ritualistic precision of men preparing for battle. Each action a prayer. Each movement a hope. Captain William Henderson, 31 commander. The father figure who carried the weight of every man under his command. Private Mike Sullivan, 19 gunner. The kid who had learned to turn eagerness into precision. Corporal Jake Wilson, 24 loader. Tennessee farm boy with hands quick enough to keep pace with Sullivan's shooting. Private First Class Tony DeMarco, 22 driver. Chicago Italian who could coax the Firefly through terrain that would stop other tanks. Private Sam Foster, 20 assistant driver. Texas rancher's son who knew machines the way other men knew horses. And Corporal Jim Crawford, 23 advisor. The one-eyed veteran who had started this journey in the sand of Tunisia. They checked their ammunition one final time. 12 APDS rounds, 12 chances to kill the Tigers, 12 rounds to change history. Henderson pulled out paper and pen, writing a letter to his wife Margaret, to his daughter Emily, 8 years old, who thought her daddy was invincible. His hand moved across the page in the dim light. "My dearest Margaret, tomorrow we cross to France. I cannot tell you where, but you will know from the newspapers. I want you to know that for the first time since Kasserine, I have hope. The new ammunition Crawford trained us on is extraordinary. It gives us a weapon equal to the Germans' best. If I do not come home, tell Emily her father fought with good men using a weapon designed by a father who lost his son. Every dart we fire carries the hope of families back home. I love you both more than words can say. Bill." He folded the letter, sealed it, tucked it in his jacket. Crawford sat beside him on the hull watching the dark water, thinking about his own family back in Ohio. His father, who had taught him that right tool for the right job, meant everything. Tomorrow they would find out if Mitchell's dart was the right tool. "Jim," Henderson said quietly, "you think 12 rounds will be enough?" Crawford looked at the darkness ahead. "Has to be, sir. It is all we have. And if we face more than 12 tigers, then Mike shoots perfectly and we pray for luck." The landing ships sailed into darkness. Storm clouds gathered overhead, and somewhere in France, German tiger battalions waited in concrete bunkers and camouflaged positions, confident in their armor, certain of their superiority. They did not know that 500 tiny darts were about to shatter that certainty forever. The 6th of June came with fire and blood and chaos. Henderson's Firefly crawled off the landing craft 6 hours after the initial assault. The beach was still a nightmare. Bodies in the surf, burning vehicles, artillery fire walking across the sand, the smell of cordite and death thick enough to taste. But they made it off the beach, made it through the hedgerows, made it into the grinding, brutal combat that was Normandy. For 6 weeks, they fought constantly, engaged German defensive positions, destroyed Panzer IVs and Stugs, but no tigers. The precious APDS rounds stayed untouched in their special ammunition rack. 12 rounds, still 12 rounds, waiting. Sullivan's confidence grew with each kill. Standard AP rounds worked fine against medium German armor. By mid-July, he had 7 confirmed kills, all without touching the special ammunition. Jake Wilson, the loader, voiced what others were thinking. "Maybe all the tigers are dead. Maybe we will not need those fancy darts." Crawford, scanning the horizon through binoculars with his good eye, shook his head. "They are here, defending Caen. Intelligence says a full tiger battalion. Just waiting for the right moment." "Good," Sullivan said. "I am ready." Crawford lowered the binoculars, looked at the young gunner. "Mike, no one is ready for a tiger until you face one. I do not care how many Panzer IVs you killed. The tiger is different, bigger, meaner, and the crew inside knows they are driving an invincible machine. That confidence makes them dangerous." July 18th, Operation Goodwood, the largest British tank offensive of the campaign. Hundreds of Shermans advancing toward Caen across open fields, and defending Caen, a tiger battalion that had been saving its strength for exactly this moment. The morning intelligence briefing changed everything. All units confirmed tiger battalion in sector. Lead tank identified as number 205. Skull insignia on turret. Commander Colonel Friedrich Weber. Crawford froze. The binoculars fell from his hand. That number, that insignia, that name. Henderson saw Crawford's face go pale. "Jim, you know that commander. He killed my platoon. 43 men. Danny Martinez, all of them." Henderson's voice was gentle. "Then today we settle accounts." But Crawford was not thinking about revenge anymore. 18 months had changed him, trained him, taught him that the best way to honor the dead was to keep the living alive. He was not here to kill Weber. He was here to make sure Weber could never kill anyone again. "All Firefly crews," Henderson said into the radio. "Weapons free on tigers. APDS authorized." They advanced across open farmland. 3 standard Shermans with them. The morning sun broke through clouds, and then Sullivan's voice crackled over the intercom. "Movement. Tree line. 1,200 yards." Crawford swung his binoculars. Even with one eye, he could recognize that shape. Tiger. No question. "Confirmed tiger," he said. His voice was steady. All the training, all the preparation. This was the moment. "Mike, APDS round." "APDS," Jake echoed, pulling one of the precious darts from its rack. "Up." 15 months of development, 7 months of training, 12 rounds per tank. And this was shot number 1. Henderson's voice was calm, professional. "Range 1100, target moving left. Mike, remember your breathing." Crawford leaned close to Sullivan's position. "This round flies faster than standard, less lead required." "I got it, Corporal." Henderson, gunner, Sabot tank. Sullivan identified. Henderson, fire. Sullivan on the way. The 17-pounder roared. That distinctive sharp crack. The Sabot separated perfectly. 4 petals blooming away from the tungsten core. The dart streaked across 1,100 yards in less than 2 seconds. Impact. Not the dull clang of a bouncing round. Not the frustrated thud of failed penetration. A sharp, clean crack. The sound of physics defeating steel. The Tiger stopped. Smoke poured from hatches. Internal explosion visible through the commander's cupola. Catastrophic kill. Jake's voice was shaking. Holy God, it worked. It actually worked. Sullivan sat frozen at the sight, hand still on the controls. We just killed a Tiger. From the front. At 1,100 yards. Crawford's voice was quiet. Of course it worked. Dr. Mitchell does not make mistakes. Henderson. 1 down, 11 rounds left. Mike, you just did what Allied tankers have been trying to do for 18 months. You killed a Tiger in a frontal engagement. The radio exploded with chatter. Other units had seen it. Word spread like wildfire. A Firefly had killed a Tiger head-on. The impossible had happened. But Crawford was already scanning for the next target. Because where there was one Tiger, there were more. And somewhere in that tree line, Weber's Tiger 205 was waiting. They found it an hour later. Hold down position behind rubble in a village. Only the turret visible. Skull insignia, clear even at 800 yards. Crawford felt his pulse quicken. Not from fear, from recognition. That was the tank. The one that had killed Danny. The one whose commander had sat calmly absorbing 17 useless shots before casually destroying Crawford's entire world. That is him, Crawford said. That is Weber. Henderson studied the position. Turret shot only, harder, curved armor, better chance of deflection. We should flank, Crawford said. Get a side shot, better odds. They tried, used village buildings as cover, attempted to circle around to Weber's flank. But Weber's crew was not stupid. They spotted the maneuver. The Tiger's turret traversed. The 88 fired. The shell hit a building 10 feet from the Firefly. Explosion. Debris. The concussion rocked the tank. He sees us, Henderson shouted. Mike, you need the frontal turret shot now. Sullivan's voice was tight. I cannot guarantee it will penetrate curved armor. Crawford grabbed Sullivan's shoulder. Yes, you can. You are the best gunner I ever trained. Breathe. Aim. Fire. For Danny. For all of them. Both tanks in the open now. 800 yards apart. Both crews loading. Both commanders giving fire orders. The moment stretched like glass about to shatter. Henderson, fire. Weber in his Tiger gave the same order at the same instant. 2 guns roared simultaneously. 2 rounds crossed paths in the air between them. Weber's 88mm shell struck the Firefly's frontal slope, penetrated the driver's compartment. Tony DeMarco died before he could scream. The shell continued through lodging in the engine, but not detonating. Sullivan's APDS dart struck Tiger 205's turret on the right side. Penetrated. The tungsten core tore through the fighting compartment at 4,000 feet per second. Crew members, equipment, ammunition, all became shrapnel. Secondary explosion as ammunition cooked off. The turret lifted off its ring and crashed back down at an angle. Both tanks hit, but the results were catastrophically different. The Firefly driver dead. Tank damaged but mobile. 4 crew members alive. Tiger 205 complete destruction. Turret blown, fire consuming the interior. 3 crew members bailing out through hatches before the ammunition fully detonated. Sullivan sat at the gun shaking, staring at Tony's body in the driver's seat. We lost Tony. Oh God, we lost Tony. Henderson's voice was hoarse. But we are alive, and that Tiger is dead. Mike, you killed the tank that destroyed Jim's platoon. Crawford watched through his binoculars as German crew members stumbled away from the burning Tiger. One of them had his arm in an awkward angle, burns on his face, moving like an officer even in defeat. Weber, it had to be Weber. American MPs secured the German survivors within minutes, took them to a collection point. Crawford told Henderson he needed to see them, needed to close the loop that had started 18 months ago in Tunisia. Henderson understood. Go. We will recover Tony and get the tank mobile. Take your time. Crawford found Weber sitting on the ground back against a stone wall while a medic bandaged his burns. The German officer's arm was definitely broken. His face was a mess of burns and cuts, but his eyes were clear, alert. They looked at each other. Recognition was instant and mutual. Weber spoke first in accented but clear English. You, Tunisia, Sherman gunner, I remember your tank. You survived when your crew did not. You remember. I remember every tank I destroy. Yours, I chose not to waste machine gun ammunition on your crew when you ran. I thought perhaps you learned a lesson that day. Crawford's fists clenched. You killed 43 men in my platoon, including my best friend, Danny Martinez, 19 years old. Weber's expression did not change. War. I was performing my duty as you performed yours. And today I performed mine. Weber looked at his burning Tiger, at the turret sitting askew on the hull, at the complete devastation. What round did you use that was not standard armor-piercing? Armor-piercing, discarding sabot, tungsten carbide dart, travels at 4,000 feet per second. Weber actually laughed, bitter, exhausted. A dart. We were killed by a dart. Physics does not care about size, Colonel. Only velocity and density. You taught your crews that mass defeats velocity. The math said you were wrong. Weber was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice carried something Crawford had not expected. Respect. You think you are clever. We were developing similar projectile, Panzergranat 40, same principle. We understood the physics as well as your scientists. We're developing, past tense. Tungsten shortage. We could not produce sufficient quantity. Your dart won not because your science was better. It won because you had materials we did not. We won because we had a better scientist. Dr. Robert Mitchell, Canadian. His son died at Kasserine, same day as Danny, same Tigers. That dart is his revenge and my promise kept. Weber studied Crawford's face, the eye patch, the purple heart, the set of his jaw. Then tell your Dr. Mitchell something for me. He has won more than a battle. Your dart does not merely penetrate armor, it penetrates psychology. When my crews learn that frontal armor no longer protects them, the confidence that made us dominant dies. You killed more than my tank today. You killed German armor doctrine. Good, now you know how we felt. May I ask how many of these darts you possess? Crawford said nothing. Weber smiled sadly. You do not need to answer. If you had unlimited supply, you would say so. You have perhaps 500 rounds, maybe fewer. But it does not matter. Even if you only have 100, the knowledge that any Firefly might carry one, that uncertainty destroys our tactical confidence. You have won the psychological war with a weapon you barely possess. That is brilliant. Terrifying, but brilliant. MPs came to take Weber to a POW camp. As they helped him to his feet, he looked back at Crawford. Your Dr. Mitchell should be proud. He created the weapon that will end this war. Not today, not this month, but inevitably. You cannot fight physics with propaganda. I learned that lesson today, at great cost. Crawford watched them take Weber away. He felt no triumph, no satisfaction. Just exhaustion and the heavy knowledge that Tony DeMarco had died in the same moment Tiger 205 did. Henderson approached, put a hand on Crawford's shoulder. You got your revenge. Does not bring Tony back, or Danny, or any of them. No, but it might save the next ones. August 20th, Falaise Pocket, the German army trapped and trying to break out. Tiger Battalion providing cover for the retreat. Henderson's Firefly had 4 APDS rounds remaining. They had used 8 over 6 weeks of combat, 8 confirmed Tiger kills, a record no other tank could match. Their mission hold a critical road junction. Prevent German armor from escaping the pocket. The radio warning came at dawn. All units, multiple Tigers approaching your position. Count 5 Tigers. Repeat, 5 Tigers supporting infantry. Henderson looked at Crawford. 5 Tigers, 4 APDS rounds. The math does not work. Then we better not miss. The fog lifted slowly, and then they saw them. 5 Tigers in column formation advancing with the confidence of machines that had dominated battlefields for 2 years. Sullivan's voice was steady despite the impossible odds. Lead tank, 1,400 yards. APDS, Henderson ordered. Jake loaded the first dart. Up. Sullivan fired. Clean hit. Tiger number 1 brewed up instantly. 3 rounds left. Tigers 2 and 3 split formation coming at them from different angles. 1,000 yards and closing. Sullivan fired at Tiger 2. Perfect shot. Turret penetration. Kill. 2 rounds left. 2 Tigers still coming. Tiger 3 fired. The shell screamed past, missing by feet. Return fire. Sullivan's dart struck Tiger 3's turret. Another kill. One round left. Tigers 4 and 5 both advancing. 500 yards now. Close enough to see the skull insignias on their turrets. Close enough to hear their engines. Switch to standard AP, Henderson ordered. Standard will not penetrate at this range, Crawford said. Then we have two choices. Use the last APDS on one Tiger and hope standard AP works on the other. Or we die. Sullivan's voice cut through. What if we let them get closer? Point-blank range standard AP might penetrate weak points. Driver's vision port. Lower glacis. Crawford, or they kill us first. Henderson made the call. We stay hidden. Let them advance. Mike last APDS on whichever Tiger gets closest. Then we switch to standard and aim for weak points. The Tigers advanced cautiously. 3 of their number dead. They knew a Firefly was here somewhere but could not locate it through the Firefly's camouflage. 300 yards. 200. Close enough to be terrifying. Now, Henderson said. Left tank. Sullivan fired the last APDS round. The dart struck Tiger 4 dead center. Catastrophic kill. 1 round left. 1 Tiger. 200 yards in closing. Tiger 5 spotted them. Turret traverse. The 88 swinging toward them. Jake loaded standard AP with shaking hands. This will not work. This will not penetrate. Sullivan aimed for the driver's vision port. A tiny slot in the frontal armor. Impossible shot. Under pressure. With a round not designed for this. Do it, Henderson said. Sullivan fired. The standard AP round, by some combination of skill and divine intervention, struck the vision port dead center. Penetrated through the narrow opening. Killed the driver. Tiger Phi was slewed to a halt, immobilized. The German crew bailed immediately. Tank disabled but not destroyed. Silence. Smoke. Bodies. 5 Tigers dead or disabled. 0 APDS rounds remaining. Crawford's voice was quiet. 12 shots. 8 confirmed kills. 4 shared kills. That is what victory looks like. Jake was crying. We are out of special ammunition. What if we face more Tigers, Henderson? We will not. Word from command says that was the last Tiger battalion in this sector. We broke them. Radio chatter confirmed it. Other Firefly units reporting similar success. Tiger crews abandoning tanks rather than face the darts. Psychological collapse spreading through German armor divisions. The weapon had worked. 500 rounds had shattered the myth of Tiger invincibility. 3 days later, Dr. Robert Mitchell stood in a field in France surrounded by the wreckage of German tanks. He had flown in at Churchill's request. The Prime Minister wanted a first-hand assessment of the APDS program's effectiveness. Mitchell needed to see for himself whether his creation had actually worked in combat. Crawford found him examining penetration holes in a destroyed Tiger. Mitchell's fingers traced the smooth edges of the entry wound. Small, clean, precise. Dr. Mitchell turned, saw Crawford's eye patch, saw the exhaustion, saw the weight of combat in every line of his face. Corporal Crawford, you made it through. 12 rounds, 8 kills. Your dart worked, sir. Mitchell walked among the destroyed Tigers, touching each one, silent tears running down his face. This is what Peter needed. 18 months too late for him. But it saved us, saved hundreds, maybe thousands. Henderson joined them. Dr. Mitchell, your dart broke more than armor. It broke the Tiger's psychological advantage. German crews are terrified now. They engage from extreme range. Hide. Retreat. The shift is as important as the penetration itself. Mitchell nodded slowly. That was always the goal. Make them fear us for the first time. Mike Sullivan approached hesitant. Dr. Mitchell, sir, I am the gunner who used your rounds. 8 kills. I want you to know your son's sacrifice meant something. It meant I got to go home. Mitchell shook Sullivan's hand. His voice broke. My son would have been your age. He would have liked you. He would be proud that his father's work kept you alive. They stood together in that French field, surrounded by the evidence of physics defeating propaganda. The dart had worked. The war was not over, but the balance had shifted. The Tigers were no longer invincible. And in a POW camp in England, Colonel Friedrich Weber gave an interview that would be recorded for history. Mitchell requested the meeting. Crawford accompanied him. They sat across a table from the man who had killed so many who had believed so completely in German superiority. Weber looked at Mitchell. "You are Dr. Mitchell, the creator. You killed my son, Lieutenant Peter Mitchell, Kasserine Pass." "I killed many sons at Kasserine, I am sorry. That is insufficient, I know, but I am sorry nonetheless. I did not come for apologies. I came to understand. When did you know that Tiger was vulnerable?" Weber thought carefully before answering. "The moment Crawford's dart penetrated my turret. I understood what we should have learned from all of military history. The gun always evolves faster than the armor. Always. We built the thickest steel believing mass would always defeat velocity. Your dart proved us wrong. Physics defeated engineering. Science defeated propaganda. Your crew's still fighting. Yes, but differently. Cautiously. The aggression is gone. Your dart killed that faster than it killed our tanks." Mitchell leaned forward. "Good, that was the point. To make you afraid for once." Weber nodded. "Then you have succeeded completely. Not just tactically, philosophically. You proved that knowledge properly applied defeats brute force. That is a lesson Germany needed to learn." After the war, the APDS round was recognized as one of the most significant weapons developments of World War II. Not because of how many tanks it destroyed, though the number was substantial, but because of how it changed the nature of armored warfare forever. Every modern tank in the world today fires a descendant of Mitchell's dart. The M1 Abrams uses depleted uranium penetrators. The British Challenger uses tungsten alloy. The principle remains identical: small, dense, fast, physics over mass. But the legacy runs deeper than hardware. The APDS represented three fundamental American principles that defeated Nazi Germany's industrial might: innovation over tradition. When faced with an impossible problem, Americans did not just build bigger. They rethought the entire approach. Meritocracy over hierarchy. A Canadian immigrant and an Ohio farm boy collaborated as equals. Competence mattered. Not class, not background. Determination over defeatism. When generals laughed, Mitchell persisted. When veterans doubted, Crawford trained them anyway. When ammunition ran out, Sullivan made impossible shots. Americans refused to accept impossible. They solve it. If you are watching this and you are part of the generation that fought this war or were raised by that generation, you know these principles firsthand. Your fathers and grandfathers did not win World War II just with factories and soldiers. They won with innovation, with willingness to try ideas that looked crazy, with immigrant scientists and farm boy soldiers working together toward a common goal. The dart that killed the Tiger is a perfect symbol of what made America exceptional. Taking a problem everyone said was impossible, applying science and determination, training hard, and winning. That spirit, that refusal to accept defeat, that belief in innovation over tradition, that is the inheritance your generation passed down. In a world that sometimes forgets what made America great, this story reminds us. American greatness was never about having the biggest guns. It was about having the smartest ideas and the bravest people willing to bet everything on them. Today you can see an original APDS round at the Smithsonian. Next to it, a photograph. Dr. Mitchell and Corporal Crawford shaking hands in France, August 1944. Mitchell died in 1967. At his funeral, military honor guards from 3 nations attended. The eulogy said he saved more lives with physics than most generals saved with armies. Crawford returned to Ohio, became a teacher, taught engineering for 40 years. Students remembered one phrase he repeated constantly: right tool for right job. His father's wisdom, applied to tanks, applied to life. Mike Sullivan survived, got an engineering degree, designed artillery for the U.S. Army. He credited Mitchell's dart with inspiring his career. If a weird-looking toy could kill a tiger, then anything is possible if physics is on your side. Colonel Weber spent 5 years in a POW camp, returned to Germany, became a professor, lectured on lessons from defeat, often mentioned the dart. Americans won because they questioned assumptions. We assumed mass always defeats velocity. They proved us wrong. That is why science, not propaganda, determines outcomes. Henderson made it home, retired as a full colonel, lived to 87. At his funeral, his family found the D-Day letter he had written but never mailed. The last line, every dart we fire carries hope for families back home. That hope, that tiny tungsten dart, changed history. If this story moved you, then need you to do three things. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, especially veterans or their children who remember when America solved impossible problems. In the comments, tell your story. Did your father or grandfather serve in World War II? What did they tell you about American innovation, about the weapons that turned the tide? Subscribe to this channel. We tell stories like this. Stories of American courage and the ordinary people who changed history. The dart they laughed at killed the invincible tiger. American innovation defeated Nazi engineering. A father's grief became a weapon that saved thousands of sons. Never forget, physics does not care about propaganda. Science does not respect tyranny. And American ingenuity, when applied with courage and determination, remains the most powerful force on earth. Thank you for spending this hour with me. God bless America, and God bless the generation that saved the world with tungsten darts and unshakable resolve.